shock 72 hours after grid down. Starvation, supply shortages, food lines, no clean water, no gas, transportation, standstill. He's, of course, talking about the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. A recent study noted that the majority of people have enough food in their pantries to feed their household for about 3 days, and that seemingly stable societies are really just 9 meals from anarchy, with most of us dependent on just-in-time transportation systems to always be available. Few ever consider the worst-case scenario. For tens of thousands of East Coast residents, that worst-case scenario is now playing out in real time. No longer are images of starving people waiting for government handouts restricted to just the third world. In the midst of crisis, once civilized societies will very rapidly descend into chaos when essential infrastructure systems collapse. So obviously we've got the horrible situation now, just a few days post Hurricane Sandy. We already see images of Americans, dumpster diving, getting into fistfights over gas, begging for food, looting homes and businesses in many different areas. And according to the latest reports, which I was just reading before we came on air, the situation's only getting worse. There are reports of people defecating in hallways. They're saying it could be at least another week until the power is restored. And all this chaos that we've seen over the past 48 hours, of course, occurred in just the first 3-4 days after the hurricane hit. So, I mean, just imagine what a crisis that lasted weeks or months would do to a major metropolitan area. And of course, we had the pathetic images of people crowded around Starbucks outlets because they couldn't live for a day without their Wi-Fi access. That was the most important thing to him. And that video, those images of people picking through trash for rotten food, is of course a stinging rebuttal to all those who the establishment characterized as paranoid or crazy for buying storable food. Those people are laughing right now. In fact, there were many people featured on that National Geographic program, Doomsday Preppers, that were living in New York and had months and months of storable food. You're not going to see them picking through dumpsters. And remember, this is a government that characterizes preppers who buy food in bulk as terrorists. We had the FBI putting out the community action program flyers characterizing people who buy bulk from military surplus stores as potential terrorists. Those terrorists are now feeding themselves while a lot of people in New York and other areas are picking through trash. So despite the fact that, many commentators have ludicrously claimed that this hurricane fallout shows the need for more power to be concentrated into federal hands, it's the very people who chose to live their lives in a way diametrically opposed to that whole idea of dependence on the state that have coped the best. They're the ones thriving. They're the ones that are able to feed their families. So as this article out of SHTF Plan points out, it sounds harsh, but you really can have no sympathy for these people who have been forced to pick through trash simply to feed themselves. They refused to get prepared, and now they're reaping the consequences. They were warned. They didn't listen. And we've been warning for years that when society breaks down, even temporarily, as it is in this case, you cannot rely on the government to feed you. That's why we promote storable food. That's why everybody else in this movement does. And I think they've been proven accurate. They've been vindicated by the events of the past week. So Hurricane Sandy has been a major poster child for self-sufficiency, but it's also been a benchmark for illustrating how dependent Americans are in these major cities on the status quo, when that status quo is only going to be upset to an even greater degree in the years to come. So the preppers were vindicated. The crazy paranoid terrorists who bought all the storable food are able to feed themselves and are not picking through trash. If you listen to your government and said, nothing's going to happen, government's going to take care of you, then you'd be out on the street like the rest of them.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.